You know, we're always told to trust the research when we talk about schools. But if the experts really have all the answers, then why is education always filled with so much debate? Well, in this explainer, we're going to peel back the curtain on the messy, complicated, and honestly fascinating world of education research to figure out exactly why.
And wow, this quote really just hits it on the head, doesn't it? For a field that impacts every single one of us, education research has a serious reputation problem. It's often waved away as being impractical or irrelevant, and no matter what it does, it always seems to be under fire from someone.
So that's the big question we're tackling. Why? What is it about the study of schools that makes it so darn controversial? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's layered, it's complex, and it actually starts with a problem that, well, we can all probably recognize.
Okay, so the first piece of the puzzle is something we can all relate to. You know, unlike something like quantum physics or brain surgery, pretty much every single one of us has spent years inside a school. And that personal experience, it makes all of us feel like we're experts on how it should work.
This quote from historian Carl Kastel absolutely nails it. Because we've all sat in those desks, we all feel like we have a right to a strong opinion. And what that means is that education research gets scrutinized from every possible angle in a way that other scientific fields just don't.
But it's not just about pressure from the outside. A huge part of the problem is that the field of education research is wrestling with this deep internal identity crisis. It's fundamentally torn over what its purpose is even supposed to be.
You see, at its core, the field is trying to serve two completely different masters. On one hand, it desperately wants to be a serious academic discipline, building these big, fundamental theories about how we learn. But on the other hand, it's expected to provide immediate, useful answers to teachers and policymakers who are in the trenches right now.
Here's a really great way to think about it. On one side, you've got the lab. That's the slow, careful, conclusion-driven university research. On the other side, you've got the school board meeting, and they need answers for a decision they have to make tomorrow. And when you try to be both of those things at once, you often end up satisfying neither.
And this split has real-world consequences. Teachers look at the lab research and think it's way too abstract to use in their classroom. School boards think it's too slow and filled with, well, maybes. The result is this whole field that feels kinda misshapen. It just lurches from one research fad to the next, never really building that stable foundation that people on the ground can trust.
Now, this internal conflict, it isn't new. In fact, you could say it's been baked right into the DNA of education research from the very beginning. This field wasn't born in some quiet, peaceful lab. It was born right in the middle of a political fight. Just look at this timeline. This fight has been raging for almost 200 years. All the way back in the 1840s, research was being used as a weapon in political battles. And every time someone tried to make it a pure science, a bombshell report like the one in 1966 would drop and pull it right back into the center of a huge national argument.
Okay, let's zoom in on that 1966 report, because it's the perfect example of this tension. It was officially called the Equality of Educational Opportunity Survey, and it was one of the biggest social science studies ever done. And it was designed to test an idea that pretty much everyone just assumed was true.
So here was the common sense thinking. If you want to make student achievement better, especially for kids who are disadvantaged, you just give their schools more stuff, right? More money, nicer buildings, better paid teachers. I mean, it seems totally obvious. The Coleman Report decided to put that exact idea to the test on a massive national scale. So, these researchers analyzed data from thousands of schools, from hundreds of thousands of students. And when they finally crunched all those numbers, the conclusion they reached sent absolute shockwaves through the worlds of both education policy and research. And there's the punchline. The report found that differences in things like funding and facilities had surprisingly little effect on how well students did. What mattered far, far more was a student's family background and the social and economic status of their classmates. This was a subversive, deeply uncomfortable finding, and it fueled arguments that are still going on today. So you have all these historical battles, these deep internal divisions, and it all leads to one giant problem, a huge gap between the researchers and the very people they're supposed to be helping.
And that brings us to the infamous disconnect between the university and the actual classroom.
You see, for decades, the model was really simple and totally top-down. Academics up in their ivory towers would figure out the truth about learning, they'd pass that knowledge down to teachers, and teachers were just supposed to implement it. It was a one-way street, no questions asked.
But this whole top-down model had a fatal flaw. As the researcher Anne Brown herself realized, her brilliant ideas were totally useless without a great teacher to actually bring them to life. The model just completely ignored the wisdom and the expertise of the people who were actually in the classroom every day.
And the result was pretty predictable, right? Teachers became deeply skeptical of research that felt totally disconnected from the messy, chaotic reality of their daily jobs. And that broken bridge between the lab and the classroom, that is a huge reason for that awful reputation we started with.
So, is the field just doomed to repeat this cycle of conflict and mistrust forever? Well, not necessarily. There's a really promising movement happening to try and heal these divisions and build a much better bridge for the future.
This new vision is all about one word: collaboration. It's about tearing down that old one-way street and creating a real partnership. This means treating teachers like co-researchers, not just test subjects. It means researchers and funders and practitioners all sit down at the same table to set the agenda together. And it means actually engaging with school boards and the press and the public to build a shared understanding.
And what this all points to is a really profound shift in thinking. Maybe the goal of research isn't just to find the single right universal answer. Maybe its most important job is to give all of us the tools and the evidence we need to have smarter, more informed conversations about one of the most complex challenges we face: how we educate our kids.
And that leaves us with this one last big question. Education is always going to be about what we value as a society. It's always going to be political. In a world like that, is it really realistic to expect science to hand us simple, clean solutions? Or is the best we can hope for, and maybe the most valuable thing we can get, a way to talk about our toughest problems with just a little more clarity, a little more evidence, and maybe a lot more understanding?